Hey y'all, what's up? My name's Elizabeth, and today we're going to be talking about remembering. How I came up with this video was actually this morning. I got up and looked at my calendar and realized that it was September 11th, which means 9/11. And then later that day, I got onto my Facebook account and saw all these pictures of the Twin Towers, of course, talking about remembering. And as I was thinking about, video ideas, I was thinking about the word remember. It's a word that we use a lot, but how do we actually remember something? Something so significant, something that is a turning point, an event that we don't want to ever forget. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. What does it really mean to remember something? And not just to remember it, but to embrace it. I think a lot of people just post photos of 9/11, but it doesn't really sink in with them. So how do we not just remember something, but also remember it and let it sink in as we are remembering the moment, that time period, that event that changed us forever? So as I was thinking about the word remember, I was thinking about the scent of when the Israelites crossed over from the Jordan River. Now, you might not think that that's a big deal, but it was during the harvest time where the Jordan River overflowed. But when the priests stepped their feet in, God miraculously made the ground dry. So the people crossed over on dry ground. And that takes place in Joshua chapter 3. Now Joshua wants the people to remember this. And how does he do that? Well, I'm going to start reading from Joshua 4, verse 3. Then Joshua called for the 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, "Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that you may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, 'What does those stones mean to you?' then you should tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever." So Joshua tells these men to gather 12 stones to represent the 12 tribes of Israel, because he does not want the people to forget. And he instructs them to tell the next generation why this memorial is here, because they don't want to forget. They don't want to forget what God has done for them. Abraham set up different altars along his journey as God appeared to him, so he didn't forget. He stopped and worshiped and built an altar. And by the way, the altar was not just for him. Anyone around could see that altar built. They could ask, why is that altar built there? Why is it built there? Well, he could explain that. Jacob also built altars too. And we see that. Different days in Israel were set aside to remember what God has done for them. Passover was one event where they remembered what God has done for them, how they exited Egypt. The unleavened bread within the Passover meal represented how they were in a hurry. I believe in Passover they had something sour to remember their hardship in Israel. They had a lamb, and they go over this whole entire scene to the next generation so they too can remember. A lot of times we forget. we forget God's goodness. We forget what God has done for us. For my sermon that I have to prepare for class, we've been reading Deuteronomy 31 through 10. And it is all about remembering. All about it. Moses is about to leave. He's about to die. And he's going to pass the leadership on to Joshua. He's telling the Israelites, remember, even though you're in the midst of trials, remember. Turn back to God, because when you remember, don't just remember, take action when you do remember. It talks about how if the Israelites turn back to God, He will restore them. Not just restore them with material wealth, prosperity, but restore them spiritually. It talks about circumcising their hearts, as in clean their hearts out, so they will be solely dedicated to the Lord. Remember. Throughout Deuteronomy, it talks about remembering and teaching your children, the next generation, about the events that took place. You should speak of them and talk of them when you walk by the way, when you sit down in your house, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Deuteronomy 32:7. Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you, your elders, and they will tell you. Remember. How do we remember the Christmas story? A lot of times we retell that story, and retell it, and retell it. Remembering something is so important. But I just talked about remembering like general events, biblical events, but let's talk about more on a personal level, okay? Remembering what God has done for you. Remembering what it was like the day that you got saved or the day that you got baptized. Because I think when we forget about those events, we forget about where we came from, how we got here, how we got where we are today. A lot of times we could either A, take credit for it of ourselves, which totally was not ourselves, or B, we can only see the hard times we're in right in the midst and forget how God has carried us through the entire way. I remember a woman told me once that she had a jar, and every time she saw God's blessing, she put it in a jar. That way, anytime during a hardship, during struggles, she would open that jar up and read it. Read how God has blessed her. It might be in the minute way, as in your car breaking down and then realizing that there was an accident on the same highway that you would have been on, and you could have actually been in that accident. Maybe something like that. Or just praying that you got a good spot in Walmart's parking lot. I don't know. But I think so often we forget God's goodness. We need to remember that. We need to tell other people what God has done for us in our lives, and what God has done for not just us, but for His people. How He has changed us. We need to remember that. So throughout this whole video, I talked about remembering. Now I want to leave you all with a couple of thoughts. The first is, how do you remember something? How do you remember something special to you that changed your life forever? Did you put a date on it and celebrate it? Do you have a day that you just sit in quiet and remember? What about your testimony? As in, when the day that you got saved, did you write it down to remember it? I know for me, I wrote down my testimony And I write down each year, like a summary of that year after I got saved. And I spend a day just reading over that. Usually I believe it's like the day beforehand. I sit down and just read it to remember it. And also to see where I was and where I am now. And how God has drastically changed my life. I want to remember that. And so for me, I write it down and dedicate, I think last time I dedicated about like an hour to just sitting there reading. And I would go through all my other journals at the same time as well. And just remember how much God has changed my life. Remember. Lastly, I have a challenge for you all. And I just came up with this, but I think it's be a great idea. For at least 4 weeks, I want you to write down when you notice God's hand working. It could be as simple as you just having a bad day and looking outside and seeing that rainbow, which is also a symbol for remembering. Do you know what the rainbow is? The rainbow stands for God promising that He'll never destroy the world through a flood again. That's a remembrance, a symbol for us to remember. So, 4 weeks, write down when you see God's hands working in your life, through someone else's life. Write that down and put it in either a jar, a jug, a box, just a slip of paper, cut it out and put it in there. And then I would say at least each week, look over and see what you collected for the slips of paper. It could be only one thing, but at least by the end of the 4 weeks, you at least have 4 things. And I hope you get 2 things out of this. Is that number 1, you start noticing more of God's blessings throughout your life. And number 2, that you have something to look back to and see, wow, this is how God has worked in my life. And if you continue this process beyond 4 weeks, just 1 blessing per week, you'll have 52 blessings to go over. And you don't just go over it maybe just once a week. You can do that too for the start of it. But start using it also when you see hard times coming or when you feel in despair. Just look over and see, wow, in those moments when I did feel in despair, this is how God worked. It could be a sentence, it could be a paragraph if you want to, but I suggest keeping it short. Maybe saying something like, I was having a hard time, but someone said to me, I'll pray for you. Something as simple as that, and put that in the jar. That's my challenge to you all, and I'll be doing that too. For 4 weeks, I'll be doing that, at least for 4 weeks. But actually, I hope that I will realize the benefit, and I think I always see the benefit, but sometimes I lose habits. But at least 4 weeks, and just see how maybe that has changed you in the next 4 weeks. And I'll post the video on it and share with you all what the results are from this. So I hope you'll all do that and join me for that challenge. So I hope you all enjoyed this video all about remembering. As always, please give a thumbs up if you enjoy it. If you have any event that means something to you or a tradition that you have in your family to remember something special, please put that down in the comments down below, because I'd love to hear from you all. And I want to say thanks to my parents for giving me this new chair, because I've sat in a elementary student's chair for since I was in 5th grade with vibrant colors on it. So I finally got an actual official chair, so I want to give thanks to them. And I also want to let you know that I actually have a new website that you can guys go to. So this is the website right here. And yeah, it's a website all about poetry, since I do write poetry. And so you guys can check it out right there. And I'll see you guys next time. Remember to subscribe, push that bell button for notification, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. God bless. Bye.